The baseball world just got turned completely upside down, and if you're a Blue Jays fan, you need to understand exactly what just happened and why it matters so much more than you might think. The New York Mets just made a trade that's sending shockwaves through every front office in baseball, and it's creating serious complications for Toronto's offseason plans. Marcus Stroman is heading to New York while Brandon Nimmo is packing his bags for Texas. This isn't just another routine trade. This is the Mets making a calculated power move that changes the entire landscape of who can compete for the biggest free agents available, and Kyle Tucker is sitting right at the center of everything. Let's break down the financial implications first, because that's where this gets really interesting. The Mets are taking on Stroman's remaining money while shipping out Nimmo's contract. When you do the math, they're creating massive payroll flexibility at the exact moment when one of the best outfielders in baseball is potentially available. That's not a coincidence. That's strategic roster construction with a very specific target in mind. Toronto has been connected to Kyle Tucker for months now. The fit makes perfect sense. You've got a young core with Guerrero and Bichette that needs another superstar to truly compete. Your outfield situation has been questionable for years. Tucker gives you elite production, championship experience, and the kind of two-way impact that transforms good teams into great ones. But here's the problem. Every single day that passes without Toronto making an aggressive move is another day that teams like the Mets are positioning themselves to strike. The competition isn't sitting around waiting. They're actively clearing space, moving pieces, and preparing to make offers that could blow everyone else out of the water. Think about what the Mets just accomplished from a pure strategy standpoint. They identified their weakness, addressed it by moving a player who didn't fit their long-term plans, and simultaneously created the financial room to pursue exactly who they want. That's how winning organizations operate. They don't hope things work out. They make things happen. Now compare that to where Toronto sits right now. The Blue Jays have made some noise this offseason, but they haven't made the kind of statement move that tells the baseball world they're all in. And when you're competing against markets like New York, that hesitation can be fatal. Free agents want to see commitment. They want to know the organization is serious about building a championship roster. Tucker isn't just any free agent. We're talking about someone who can completely alter the trajectory of your franchise. Put him in a lineup with Guerrero and Bichette, and suddenly you've got one of the most dangerous offensive cores in baseball. Add in the pitching depth Toronto has been building, and you're looking at a legitimate World Series contender. But landing a player of Tucker's caliber requires more than just making an offer. It requires convincing him that Toronto is the right place to win, that the organization is committed to competing at the highest level, and that he's going to be part of something special. When teams like the Mets are making these kinds of aggressive moves, it sends a message that they're willing to do whatever it takes. The Yankees are always going to be in the mix for premium talent. The Orioles are building something legitimate. The Red Sox have money to spend and a new leadership group trying to prove themselves. And now the Mets just inserted themselves into the conversation in a major way. Toronto can't afford to be passive in this environment. Here's where it gets really complicated for the Blue Jays front office. They've got budget considerations that other teams don't necessarily have. Rodgers needs to approve major expenditures, and they want to see a clear path to contention before opening the checkbook. But waiting for perfect conditions means you're always going to be one step behind the organizations that act decisively. The other factor nobody's talking about enough is the domino effect this creates throughout the market. If the Mets land Tucker, suddenly all the teams that were pursuing him need to pivot. Maybe that means Cody Bellinger gets more attention. Maybe Juan Soto's market heats up even more. Maybe teams start getting creative with trades for controllable outfielders. Every major move creates opportunities and complications depending on how prepared you are to adapt. What Toronto really needs to ask themselves is what kind of organization they want to be. Are they going to be the team that's always in the conversation but never quite willing to go that extra mile? Or are they going to make the kind of bold move that shifts perception and shows players this is a destination worth considering? There's also the reality that Tucker has leverage here. He knows multiple teams want him. He knows he can command a massive contract. He doesn't need to settle for anything less than exactly what he wants. That means Toronto needs to present a compelling case beyond just money. What's the vision for this team? Who else are they adding? How close are they to actually competing for championships? The pessimistic view is that Toronto has been in this situation before, and it usually doesn't end well. Big-name free agents get connected to the Blue Jays for months, the speculation builds, and then they sign elsewhere while Toronto settles for a solid but unspectacular Plan B. That pattern needs to change if this franchise wants to be taken seriously by elite talent. But there's also an optimistic scenario here. Maybe the Mets making this move actually forces Toronto's hand.
Maybe it creates the urgency needed to push Rodgers into approving a franchise-altering deal. Maybe this is the catalyst that turns speculation into action. The winter meetings are coming up, and that's traditionally when things really start happening. General managers are all in the same place, negotiations accelerate, and deals that have been percolating for weeks suddenly come together.
Toronto needs to be ready to move quickly when opportunities present themselves rather than overthinking and missing their window. Another consideration is what happens if Toronto doesn't land Tucker? What's the backup plan? Are there trade targets that make sense? Are there other free agents who could provide similar value even if they don't have the same name recognition? The front office needs to be working multiple tracks simultaneously rather than putting all their hopes on one outcome. The roster construction side of this is fascinating too. If you add Tucker, how does that change everything else you're trying to accomplish? Does it mean you can be more conservative with pitching additions? Does it allow you to take bigger risks elsewhere because you've solidified one major area? These decisions are all interconnected. What's undeniable is that the Mets just made this whole situation more complicated for Toronto. They've got the financial flexibility now, they've got the New York appeal, they've got ownership that's proven they'll spend whatever it takes to win, and they've got a roster that's already pretty talented before even adding someone like Tucker. Toronto can't control what other teams do, but they can control their own approach. They can decide to be aggressive rather than cautious. They can make the kind of offer that's difficult to turn down. They can build a compelling case for why Tucker should want to be a Blue Jay rather than hoping circumstances break their way. The next few weeks are going to be absolutely critical for shaping Toronto's future. Missing out on Tucker wouldn't necessarily be catastrophic if there's a strong plan B ready to execute. But missing out because the front office was too slow or too conservative, that's the kind of mistake that haunts organizations for years. Blue Jays fans deserve to see their team compete for the biggest names available. They deserve to see aggressive moves that signal championship ambitions. They deserve to see the front office match the passion of the fan base. Whether that happens with Tucker specifically or through some other combination of moves remains to be seen. What's clear is that standing still isn't an option anymore. The Mets just raised the stakes. Other contenders are making their moves, and Toronto needs to decide right now whether they're going to be players in this market or spectators watching everyone else get better. The choice is theirs, but the window for making it is closing fast.